Rain tapped softly against the skylights above Hayes' restoration studio. Inside the quiet workshop, the outside world seemed to disappear. The scent of old canvas, linseed oil, and varnish filled the room, while classical music drifted gently through hidden speakers. Charlotte Hayes adjusted the magnifying visor over her eyes and leaned closer to the century-old landscape resting on her work table. To everyone else, it was worthless. A forgotten oil painting purchased at a suburban estate auction for barely $20. To Charlotte, every painting deserved another chance. She traced a tiny crack near the lower corner with the finest sable brush she owned. The damaged varnish slowly dissolved. Then she frowned. Something wasn't right. The pigments underneath didn't match the visible artwork. Someone had painted over an entirely different image. Charlotte carefully reduced the solvent. Another thin layer lifted away. Beneath it, a straight black line appeared, not part of a landscape. Too deliberate, too precise. She reached for a stronger inspection lamp. More careful cleaning revealed another line. Then another. Together, they formed what looked disturbingly similar to geometric markings. Coordinates. Architectural drawings? No. Symbols. Someone had hidden something beneath the painting. Charlotte instinctively photographed every stage of the restoration. Years of professional experience had taught her never to disturb unexpected discoveries without documentation. She smiled quietly. This just became interesting. Her phone buzzed across the workbench. Her assistant, Megan. Still working? Charlotte laughed softly. When am I not? You know, normal people leave work before midnight. I'm restoring history. You're restoring overtime. Charlotte promised she would head home soon. Neither woman realized that within the hour, history would begin rewriting Charlotte's life. The following morning, the restoration studio opened as usual. Collectors arrived. Museum representatives stopped by. Nothing seemed unusual until shortly after 10. A black SUV rolled slowly past the studio. Then another. Then another. Charlotte barely noticed. Luxury vehicles were common in Boston's financial district. She returned to her microscope. As another layer disappeared beneath the brush, faint golden ink emerged from beneath the original canvas. Gold leaf, not decorative. Written, tiny handwritten symbols stretched across hidden linen that should never have existed beneath the visible artwork. Charlotte's heartbeat quickened. Someone had intentionally concealed an older document beneath a newer painting. Her professional instincts immediately took over. She stopped, photographed everything, placed protective glass over the exposed section. She reached for her laptop to contact the museum conservation board. The studio door chimed. A middle-aged man wearing an expensive navy suit entered. He smiled politely. Miss Hayes? Yes. My employer would like to purchase the painting. Charlotte blinked. It's not for sale. I understand. He is prepared to offer $100,000. She almost laughed. You haven't even seen it. He doesn't need to. Charlotte studied him carefully. Who is your employer? I'm afraid he prefers privacy. I'm afraid I prefer knowing who I'm doing business with. The man smiled again. My employer respects that answer. He placed a business card on the counter. Blank. No name. Only a phone number. Then he left. Charlotte stared after him. $100,000 for a painting she had purchased for $20. Something was very wrong. By evening, she had uncovered even more of the hidden layer. The golden markings connected into an intricate pattern unlike anything she had ever restored. She enlarged the photographs on her monitor. Rows of symbols. Ancienne maritime référence. Compass markings. Handwritten numbers. Someone had disguised a navigational document as a landscape painting. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang immediately, a second time, then a third. Finally, she answered. Charlotte Hayes. A calm, male voice replied. Stop restoring the painting. She frowned. I'm sorry. Seal it. Walk away. Forget you ever found it. Who is this? Silence. Then, if you continue, people will die. The line went dead. Charlotte, still at her phone. She tried calling back. Disconnected. Her stomach tightened. She told herself it had to be a prank. Yet, she found herself locking every door before returning to the painting. Outside, across the street, another black SUV quietly pulled to the curb. Its engine remained running. Night settled over Boston. Charlotte finally switched off the workshop lights. The old painting rested inside a climate-controlled cabinet. She locked it carefully before stepping into the rain. The streets were nearly empty. She wrapped her coat tighter against the cold and began walking toward the parking garage 2 blocks away. She never noticed the dark sedan pulling away from the curb behind her. Inside the vehicle, a man spoke into an encrypted radio. Visual confirmation. The restoration is complete? Not yet. A pause. Then another voice answered. Do not let her finish. Charlotte reached the underground garage and unlocked her car. Just as she opened the driver's door, she heard footsteps. Too many. She turned. 3 men emerged from the shadows between the concrete pillars. Expensive suits, expressionless faces. One carried a silenced pistol. Another held a black briefcase. The third smiled politely. Miss Hayes, our employer, would like another opportunity to purchase your painting. Charlotte instinctively stepped backward. It isn't for sale. The smile disappeared. I'm afraid. That wasn't a request. Before anyone could move, the deafening roar of powerful engines echoed through the garage. Headlights flooded the darkness. 4 black SUVs burst through the entrance, surrounding the armed men in seconds. Doors flew open simultaneously. Elite bodyguards in tailored black suits took precise defensive positions. Every weapon pointed at the 3 strangers. Silence. Then another car entered. Unlike the others, it moved slowly, elegantly. A black Rolls Royce Phantom came to a gentle stop beside Charlotte. The rear door opened. A tall man stepped out. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Dark hair brushed neatly back. Steel gray eyes that missed nothing. He didn't look at the gunman. He looked only at Charlotte. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Finally, his calm voice broke the silence. Miss Hayes, you've uncovered something. My father died trying to protect. The armed men slowly lowered their eyes. Even they seemed to recognize him. Charlotte swallowed. And you are. He stepped 1 pace closer. Damian Moretti. A brief pause. The last man you should trust. Another pause. And the only one who can keep you alive. Before Charlotte could answer, a sniper's bullet shattered the garage lights above them. Darkness swallowed everything. Darkness swallowed the underground garage. The shattered ceiling lights rained glass across the polished concrete as Charlotte instinctively ducked. A second shot echoed through the cavernous structure. One of Damian Moretti's bodyguards stepped in front of him without hesitation, scanning the upper levels through night vision optics. North Catwalk. He barked into his earpiece. 2 shooters. Damian never flinched. His steel-gray eyes remained fixed on Charlotte. Get down. His voice was calm enough to cut through the chaos. Charlotte dropped behind a concrete support column just as another bullet struck the pillar, sending chips of cement into her hair. Her heartbeat thundered. Only minutes ago, she had been worrying about varnish and cracked paint. Now, someone was trying to kill her. The 3 men who had cornered her moments earlier suddenly turned their weapons toward the upper level. Whoever had fired wasn't working with them. Another player had entered the game. Gunfire erupted from both sides. The deafening exchange echoed through the garage as Damian's security team moved with disciplined precision. No shouting, no panic, only practiced coordination. Damian crossed the open space toward Charlotte through the hail of bullets. He reached her without hesitation. Can you walk? She stared at him in disbelief. People are shooting at us. I noticed. His answer was so matter-of-fact that she almost laughed despite the terror. He removed his charcoal overcoat and draped it over her shoulders. The garage has thermal cameras. The coat will help hide your body heat until we reach the vehicle. You planned for this? I planned for everything. He gently guided her toward the waiting Rolls Royce. A bodyguard opened the rear door. The moment Charlotte climbed inside, armored glass silently rose around the cabin. Outside, the firefight continued. Within seconds, the convoy accelerated out of the garage. Only then did Charlotte realize she was shaking. Rain blurred the city lights into streaks of silver. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Charlotte stared through the reinforced window while trying to steady her breathing. Finally, she looked at Damian. You knew this would happen. I knew someone would eventually discover the painting. You should have told the police. The police don't know who to trust. She folded her arms. And I'm supposed to trust you? His expression didn't change. No, I expect you to trust the facts. He reached into a leather briefcase resting beside him. Inside was a weathered journal bound in dark green leather. The pages were yellow with age. He placed it between them. My father's journal. Charlotte hesitated. I don't understand. You will. She opened the first page. Elegant handwriting filled the margins beside sketches of ships, coastlines, and strange geometric symbols. Her eyes widened. The symbols matched the ones beneath the painting. Exactly. She flipped several more pages. Every diagram corresponded to markings she had uncovered only hours earlier. This can't be a coincidence. It isn't. Damian leaned back. My father commissioned that painting 31 years ago. He never intended anyone to admire it. He intended someone to hide something inside it. Charlotte looked back at the journal. The map. He nodded. But the painting doesn't contain the map. She frowned. Then what did I uncover? The key. He pointed toward one of the sketches. My father divided the secret into 2 parts. The journal explains how to read the symbols. The painting reveals where to apply them. Separately, they're meaningless. Together, they reveal the location of billions of dollars hidden across offshore accounts created by the old commission. Charlotte closed the journal. Then, destroy it. Damian looked at her quietly. I've wanted to. So why haven't you? Because my father left something else inside those records. His voice lowered. The identity of the man who ordered his murder. Nearly an hour later, the convoy disappeared beneath an abandoned waterfront warehouse. Massive steel doors opened silently. The vehicles descended into a concealed underground facility unlike anything Charlotte had imagined. There were no flashing lights, no shouting guards. Instead, she found polished stone floors, an elegant library, original artwork, and walls lined with antique maps. It felt more like a private museum than the headquarters of one of America's most feared crime families. An older woman approached with a warm smile. Miss Hayes, I'm Elena. She offered Charlotte a towel. You must be freezing. Charlotte accepted it almost automatically. You live here? Elena smiled. I've worked for the Moretti family longer than Damian has been alive. She glanced toward Damian with unmistakable affection. He trusts very few people. You're one of them. I raised him after his father died. Charlotte looked at Damian. For the first time, the feared Mafia boss seemed almost human, lonely, tired, as if carrying decades of unfinished grief. Later that evening, Charlotte stood alone inside the restoration room Damian had prepared for her. To her surprise, it contained professional conservation equipment identical to the tools in her own studio. Custom lighting, humidity controls, microscopes, even archival solvents. She turned slowly. You built this. Damian stood quietly in the doorway. I hoped someday the painting would be found. You expected an art conservator? I expected someone honest enough not to sell it. Charlotte studied him. You don't even know me. I've read your restoration reports for years. She blinked. My reports? They're published. You've restored churches without charging. You refused private collectors when museums couldn't compete. You returned Renaissance sketches that could have made you wealthy. His gaze remained steady. My father believed integrity was the rarest form of courage. So do I. Charlotte felt unexpectedly uncomfortable. It wasn't admiration she saw in his eyes. It was respect. The kind earned long before they met. The quiet was broken by hurried footsteps. Luca, Damian's security chief, entered carrying a tablet. Boss. They hit the studio. Charlotte's heart stopped. Miss Studio? He nodded. Burned to the ground. She grabbed the tablet. Smoke poured from the familiar brick building. Firefighters surrounded the block. Everything she had spent years building. Gone. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. They were looking for the painting. Damian answered softly. No, they were looking for you. Silence filled the room. Charlotte slowly lowered the tablet. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, she truly understood. The painting wasn't the only target anymore. She was, because she had seen what lay beneath the canvas. And somewhere beyond the walls of the underground sanctuary, every powerful crime family now believed the only person capable of unlocking the hidden fortune was Charlotte Hayes. As thunder rolled over Boston Harbor, Damian looked toward the security monitors. His expression hardened. They know where to find the key. He turned back to Charlotte. So now, they'll come for us both. The underground headquarters fell silent after Luca's report. Charlotte remained motionless, staring at the photograph of her burning restoration studio. Years of work, Hundreds of restored paintings. Every notebook she had filled with careful observations. Gone. They destroyed everything, she whispered. Damian walked beside her, his voice steady. They destroyed a building. They didn't destroy what matters. She looked up. They were too late. He gently tapped the leather journal lying on the conference table. You already uncovered the first layer. They can burn every canvas in America. They still can't recreate what you've seen. Charlotte lowered herself into a chair. And that makes me the next target. Damian didn't deny it. It makes you the only person alive who can finish what my father started. An hour later, Charlotte stood inside the secure restoration laboratory beneath the estate. The original painting rested beneath museum-grade lighting. Its cracked landscape no longer looked ordinary. Now she knew another image slept beneath it. Damian placed his father's journal beside the canvas. I've never opened these pages in front of anyone. Charlotte carefully unfolded the journal. Hand-drawn symbols covered dozens of pages. Pigment, formulas, compass bearings, chemical notes. Nothing resembled a treasure map. Instead, it looked like instructions for revealing one. She adjusted the microscope. The hidden layer wasn't painted with ordinary pigment. Damian watched quietly. What does that mean? It means your father expected conservators to find it someday. She smiled faintly. He painted for the future. Using ultraviolet light, Charlotte examined the exposed symbols. Then she compared them with the journal. Suddenly, she froze. No? Damian immediately noticed. What? Charlotte turned another page. Then another. The symbols aren't directions. They're coordinates? She slowly shook her head. They're names. She looked directly at him. They correspond to ports. Venice, Rotterdam, Hong Kong, Panama. Every location matched a historic shipping route. Damian's expression darkened. My father controlled maritime logistics. Charlotte nodded. The fortune was never buried. It was moved, hidden through shell companies and shipping registries. She pointed toward one sequence of symbols. This isn't a map. It's a ledger disguised as art. Silence filled the room. If Charlotte was correct, the painting didn't reveal where the money was. It revealed who controlled it and who had stolen it. Elsewhere, rain lashed against the windows of an old waterfront mansion. Marco Bellini slowly poured himself a glass of whiskey. Across from him stood 5 leaders, representing rival crime families. On the large screen behind them appeared Charlotte's photograph. She's alive, Bellini said calmly. But not for long. One of the older men frowned. You truly believe she can decode the painting? Bellini smiled. I know she can. He walked toward another painting hanging above the fireplace. My father commissioned the forgery. Damian's father created the original. The only person capable of separating both layers would be an art conservator. He looked around the room. So tell me, how many art conservators restored 19th century oil paintings in Boston? Nobody answered. Bellini smiled. Exactly one. He raised his glass. Fin Charlotte Hayes. Alive. For now. Back underground. Damian stood alone on the observation balcony, overlooking the indoor courtyard. Boston's harbor lay hundreds of feet above them. Rainwater streamed across reinforced skylights. He barely noticed. Elena quietly approached. You've been standing here for 20 minutes. I know. You like her. Damian remained silent. Elena smiled knowingly. I haven't seen you look at anyone that way since your father died. He looked toward the laboratory, where Charlotte continued working. I can't afford distractions. That's not what frightens you. He glanced at her. What does? Hope? The word lingered between them. Elena gently touched his shoulder. You've spent 20 years chasing ghosts. Maybe it's time to save someone who's still alive. Charlotte finally emerged from the laboratory close to midnight. Her eyes were tired but bright. I found something. Damian followed her back inside. She projected enlarged photographs onto the digital screen. Hidden beneath the visible landscape was a second signature. Not the artist's. A fingerprint, made with gold pigment. Charlotte enlarged it further. It wasn't accidental. Damian stared at it. My father. Charlotte nodded. He wanted whoever restored this painting to know it was genuine. She hesitated. But there's something else. She touched another area of the image. A faint row of microscopic letters appeared. Not painted. Scratched into the wet pigment before it dried. Damian leaned closer. The message contained only 6 words. Trust no one inside the family. Neither of them spoke, because they both understood what it meant. The man who murdered Damian's father hadn't been an outside enemy. He had been one of their own. The room's silence shattered as every security alarm activated simultaneously. Red emergency lights flooded the underground headquarters. Luca's voice echoed through the intercom. Boss, we've got movement. Damian instantly reached for the pistol beneath his jacket. Where? They're already inside. Charlotte's heart skipped. That's impossible. Luca answered only one sentence. They used Moretti security codes. Damian's expression hardened. Someone hadn't broken into the headquarters. Someone had opened the door for them. Atraitor. Before another word could be spoken, the reinforced blast doors exploded inward. Smoke rolled through the corridor. Automatic gunfire erupted. Damian instinctively pulled Charlotte behind him as marbles shattered around them. His body became her shield. Stay behind me, he ordered. Charlotte grabbed his sleeve. You'll be killed. He looked at her for the briefest moment. His normally unreadable eyes softened. Not before they reach you. Outside the laboratory, footsteps echoed through the smoke. Someone slowly approached. A familiar voice called out from the darkness. Damian, you've been searching for your father's killer for 20 years. Pause. What if I've been standing beside you all along? The silhouette stepped into the flashing red emergency lights. Damian's eyes widened. For the first time in years, the Mafia Boss looked genuinely shocked. Luca, the man who had protected him for nearly 15 years, slowly raised his weapon. I told you, trust no one inside the family. The barrel of Luca's pistol never wavered. Smoke drifted through the shattered laboratory as emergency lights painted the room in flashing crimson. Charlotte couldn't believe what she was seeing. Only minutes earlier, Luca had been issuing security orders. Now, he stood among the attackers. Damian stared at the man who had protected him for nearly 15 years. You, he said quietly. Luca gave a bitter smile. I told myself this day would never come. You murdered my father? Luca slowly shook his head. No, I betrayed him. The words landed harder than any bullet. My father trusted you. He trusted the wrong people. So did I. Before Damian could raise his weapon, masked soldiers poured into the corridor behind Luca. Gunfire erupted again. The laboratory exploded into chaos. Damian seized Charlotte's hand. This way, he pulled her through a concealed steel door hidden behind the restoration room. The wall rotated shut, just as bullets tore through the laboratory. Darkness surrounded them. A narrow maintenance tunnel stretched beneath the underground headquarters. Emergency lights flickered every few yards. Charlotte struggled to keep pace. Where are we going? The old harbor tunnels. You planned an escape route? My father did. They ran deeper beneath the city, while explosions echoed overhead. Every blast shook dust from the concrete ceiling. Charlotte glanced back. You'll lose everything. Damian didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, buildings can be rebuilt. You can't. Above them, Luca watched the hidden doorway seal shut. Marco Bellini entered the destroyed laboratory moments later. His expensive overcoat was untouched despite the firefight. He surveyed the room calmly. They escaped. They always had an exit. Bellini looked toward the damaged painting, still resting beneath protective glass. He smiled. They took the woman, but they left exactly what I wanted. He carefully lifted the painting. Luca frowned. The map isn't complete. It doesn't need to be. Bellini traced one finger across the exposed symbols. I already possess the other half. He looked toward Luca. Did Damian tell her about the journal? No. Good. Bellini's smile widened. Because the journal is only half the truth. Nearly a mile away, Damian and Charlotte emerged inside an abandoned customs warehouse overlooking Boston Harbor. Rain battered the rusted skylights. The building had clearly been abandoned for decades. Old shipping crates stood like silent monuments to another era. Charlotte leaned against a wooden beam, breathing hard. Damian checked the entrance before lowering his pistol. For the first time all night, silence? Charlotte studied him. You knew someone inside your family betrayed you. I suspected, but not Luca. He stared through a broken window toward the harbor. My father trusted him more than anyone. So did I. His voice carried no anger, only disappointment. Charlotte walked closer. You lost your father. You lost your home tonight. And now, you've lost someone you considered family. He laughed quietly. A mafia boss doesn't have the luxury of family. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't believe that. Their eyes met. Neither moved. The storm outside seemed impossibly distant. For a brief second, the world forgot about maps, money, and murder. Charlotte slowly reached toward the cut above Damian's eyebrow. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It isn't. She opened a forgotten first aid cabinet hanging on the warehouse wall. Inside were faded bandages and disinfectant. You should sit. I've survived worse. I'm sure you have. But tonight, more me. After a moment, Damian sat on an old shipping crate. Charlotte gently cleaned the blood from his forehead. He never looked away. Does it hurt? The wound? She smiled faintly. No. The silence. For the first time since they met, Damian smiled. A real one. Brief. Almost reluctant. It does. Hundreds of miles away, an elderly priest unlocked the basement archives of an isolated monastery. He carried a sealed wooden case, marked only with the Moretti family crest. Inside lay a faded photograph. 3 men stood beside an unfinished oil painting. One was Damian's father. Another was a young Luca. The third was Marco Bellini's father. Written across the back were 6 handwritten words. None of us survived that night. The priest closed his eyes. So, it has finally begun. Morning arrived beneath gray skies. Charlotte awoke to the smell of fresh coffee. Damian stood beside an old gas stove, preparing breakfast with surprising confidence. You cook? When necessary. She accepted the mug. I imagined Mafia Bosses hired chefs. They do. I fired mine. Why? He talked too much. She laughed. The sound echoed through the empty warehouse. For the first time in days, fear loosened its grip. Damian watched her quietly. You should laugh more often. She looked down at her cup. And you should smile more often. His answer came almost as a whisper. I forgot how. Charlotte wanted to say something. Instead, she reached across the small table. Their hands almost touched. Neither crossed the final inch. The moment lingered. Then Damian's encrypted phone vibrated. His expression hardened instantly. He answered without speaking. Luca's voice filled the silence. You've always searched for the man who ordered your father's murder. A pause. You've been asking the wrong question. Damian's jaw tightened. What do you mean? The order never came from Bellini. Charlotte looked up. Damian slowly stood. Luca continued. It came from someone your father trusted even more. Another pause. The man who founded the Moretti family. Damian's face went pale. My grandfather died before I was born. No, Luca replied quietly. That's what he wanted everyone to believe. The call ended. Neither Damian nor Charlotte spoke. Because if Luca was telling the truth, the conspiracy wasn't about hidden money. It wasn't even about the map. It reached back through generations. And the man responsible for destroying Damian's family might still be alive. The call ended. For several long seconds, neither Damian nor Charlotte moved. Rain hammered against the warehouse roof, while the silence settled between them. My grandfather, Damian whispered. He died before I was born. Charlotte looked into his eyes. Or someone wanted you to believe he did. Damian closed the encrypted phone and reached into his coat. There is one place my father never allowed anyone to enter. The old Moretti estate. Charlotte immediately understood. He left something there. Damian nodded once. If Luca told the truth, my father expected this day. Hours later, a convoy of black SUVs rolled through the iron gates of the abandoned Moretti estate, overlooking the Atlantic coastline. The mansion stood like a forgotten monument. Its windows were dark. Its gardens had long surrendered to nature. Only the lighthouse beyond the cliffs remained illuminated against the storm. Damian pushed open the enormous front doors. Dust drifted through pale moonlight. Nothing had changed, exactly as his father had left it 20 years earlier. Charlotte slowly walked through the grand gallery. Portraits of generations of Morettis lined the walls. One painting immediately caught her attention. Unlike the others, it had been recently cleaned. She stepped closer. It doesn't belong. Damian frowned. What do you mean? The varnish is newer. Someone restored only this painting. She removed a small ultraviolet flashlight from her restoration kit. Hidden beneath the portrait, golden symbols appeared. The same symbols hidden beneath the estate painting. Her pulse quickened. It's another layer. Working carefully, Charlotte loosened the frame. Behind it rested a thin steel safe built directly into the wall. Damian entered the combination from memory. Nothing. Charlotte looked again at the hidden symbols. They're not numbers. They're pigment codes. She compared them with the journal, then smiled. I know how your father thought. She adjusted the sequence. The safe clicked open. Inside were only 3 items: a silver pocket watch, a sealed envelope, a strip of undeveloped photographic film. Damian carefully opened the envelope. His father's handwriting filled the first page. If you are reading this, then I failed to protect our family. The money was never the secret. The map was never the prize. The painting existed to preserve the truth. Charlotte quietly developed the film using equipment stored in the restoration case. Minutes later, the final image slowly appeared. It showed 3 men standing beside unfinished shipping ledgers. Damian's father, Marco Bellini's father, and an older man Damian had never seen. On the back of the photograph, one name had been written: Alessandro Moretti, Damian's grandfather. Beneath it, one sentence: he ordered my death after I refused to become him. Damian stared at the photograph in disbelief. So Luca wasn't lying. Before anyone could speak, machine gun fire shattered the mansion windows. Glass exploded across the marble floor. Charlotte instinctively ducked. Black SUVs surrounded the estate. Marco Bellini had arrived. The front doors burst inward. Bellini entered calmly, surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. His eyes immediately found the photograph. You found it. Damian stepped in front of Charlotte. It ends tonight. Bellini laughed. No, it ends when history belongs to the winner. He slowly raised his pistol. You know what your father never understood? The empire was never built on money. It was built on fear. Charlotte looked toward the fireplace. The original painting still rested against the wall. Suddenly, she understood. The painting isn't the evidence. Everyone turned toward her. The pigments are. She picked up the canvas. My grandfather used restoration pigments unique to one workshop. She pointed toward Bellini. The same pigments appear on the forged ledgers. The paintings prove who altered the financial records. Bellini's smile disappeared. You should have sold paintings. Instead, you solved them. He pulled the trigger. Damian reacted instantly. He shoved Charlotte aside. The bullet tore through his shoulder. He staggered, but remained standing. Charlotte caught him before he fell. No. Damian forced himself upright. Stay behind me. Bellini aimed again. Before he could fire, police helicopters illuminated the estate through the shattered roof. Floodlights washed across the hall. Federal agents poured through every entrance. Luca emerged beside them in handcuffs. Charlotte looked at him in shock. You betrayed Bellini. Luca lowered his eyes. I betrayed everyone. He looked at Damian. I couldn't undo what I did 20 years ago, but I could stop it from happening again. Bellini attempted to escape. Damian intercepted him. The 2 men struggled across the gallery before Bellini reached for another weapon. Damian stopped. He remembered his father's final letter. The truth must outlive revenge. Instead of firing, he stepped back. Federal agents arrested Bellini alive. The war ended not with another execution, but with the evidence Bellini had spent decades trying to destroy. 6 months later, the restored painting hung inside the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. A small brass plaque read, Anonymous Landscape, restored by Charlotte Hayes. No mention of hidden maps. No mention of the Moretti family. Only history, exactly as Charlotte believed it should be preserved. Across the gallery, Damian stood quietly in a dark suit. No bodyguards, no weapons, only a single white lily in his hand. Charlotte smiled as she approached. "You came. I said I would." She glanced toward the painting. "You know, it never really hid treasure." He raised an eyebrow. "No?" She gently took his hand. "It hid the truth. And sometimes, that's worth far more." For the first time in years, Damien smiled without restraint. Not because the Empire had survived, not because his enemies had fallen, but because, after decades spent chasing ghosts, he had finally found a future worth protecting. Together, they walked out of the museum into the afternoon sunlight. Across the street, an elderly conservator watched them leave before opening a weathered sketchbook. Inside was an unfinished watercolor signed by Damien's father. On the final page, beneath a fresh layer of paint, one sentence slowly emerged in the light. "Every masterpiece hides another story." The old man closed the book and disappeared into the crowd. Some secrets had finally been revealed. Others were only waiting for the next person brave enough to uncover them.